Hello, welcome to the Urban Manifesto. The COVID-19 crisis is one of the biggest challenges we have faced as humanity in over a century. It's a health, economic, and social crisis all rolled into one. And as we get used to this new normal, we have a opportunity to break from the unsustainable and unhealthy patterns of the pre-COVID era and reimagine a new world. We believe cities are a crucial tool to enable inclusive, sustainable, and happier world. They're really key to solving some of the greatest challenges that we face, from environmental degradation to poverty. In the Urban Manifesto series, we lay out detailed plans for better urban futures. I am Prathima Manohar. I'm the founder of the Urban Vision, and I'm thrilled to bring this series to you along with my colleague Lucy Bullivant. We would both like to welcome all our viewers from around the world. And we're hosting this as part of Architecture Foundation's 100-day studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Lucy?
Thank you so much, Prathima, and welcome to everybody watching today. Today's webinar theme is Streets as Places of Commerce and Culture, hybrid theme. Now, you know and I know that public streets are places of startling episodes of liberation, demonstration, unspeakable stories of oppression, tragedy, and homelessness. I'm sorry. We also know that in the pandemic, a huge number of retail businesses are under huge financial strain. And this is something that undeniably, yet public streets have indomitable potential, and they deserve to revive as critically valuable, expressive arenas, showcasing the best of the human spirit and creativity, places to see and be seen in, celebrate and congregate, interact and share, places where interactive, inclusive local culture and commerce can be nurtured. And it's this imperative to overcome changes and challenges and build streets' identities as locally sustainable places, breaking with past formulas and ways of doing things to explicitly enable social value that we're focusing on this week. So I'm delighted to welcome our two guests. On our right, we have Rohit Shinkre, who's an architect with his own practice in Mumbai, founded in 1996, and the principal of Roshana Sansad's Academy of Architecture in the city there. And on the left side of the screen is Adam Walker, who founded Crate, based in the UK. He's an entrepreneur who's launching his own new next mission, Reimagining Places, in September at the London Real Estate Forum. So, guys, before we kick off with your 3-minute manifesto, first of all, I would like to ask you, how are you each of you been doing in the lockdown? Adam, maybe you answer first.
Well, I'm really enjoying my my break, my mini break. The weather's helping. I hope that the weather carries on like it has been, but yeah, it's been testing, challenging. Homeschooling is all new. I have an incredible respect for teachers now, and yeah, it's been a very interesting time for many of us. So you have to take the positives from it.
Yeah, that's undoubtedly the case. So Rohit, how have you been faring?
Pretty okay. I mean, Mumbai has had its. I mean, it's still not out of danger. We are still on the edge of things, on the brink of things to explode. But the experience has been very interesting. I mean, we have seen the city. I've never seen the city the way I've seen it in the last 15 days, come totally quiet and noiseless. And so it's been a completely surreal kind of, I mean, to be in, to be in a known environment in a completely different, in a completely different dimension almost. So it's almost like being in a movie, so because quietness is not something that you associate with Mumbai. So it's been a long time that lasts almost 2.5 months. There's no honking on the street. There are no crowds. So it's a completely different environment. It's as if you were in some other part of the world. Otherwise, work-wise, it's mostly been the college work that has been keeping us busy, because we have to teach online now next year. So a lot of changes in the way we're going to organize ourselves. So that has taken a lot of the effort. Work-wise in the studio it's kind of happening at a leisurely pace, so which is also appreciated.
Yeah, everybody's had to go through absolutely unprecedented amount of adaptation into their lives very, very quickly, and there's a huge amount. It's quite a heavy thing to process. So,
Yes.
thank you. So central to our Urban Manifesto series is inviting our speakers each week to share their 3 pressing, absolutely top priority headline points of their own manifesto relating to the theme. And then Prathima and I then go on to draw them out further through some questions. So today, responding to streets as places of commerce and culture, we're asking Adam and Rohit one by one to share their manifestos. So Adam, over to you.
Well, brilliant. So we've got our slides. Super. Thank you, Lucy. So this is an example of a meanwhile project that was a public-private sector partnership between the London Borough of Waltham Forest and Crate. And this was a really important piece of and economic development and narrative change for what is a quite difficult part of North London, Northeast London. So our challenge here was to reset an area, the narrative of an area which has had its fair share of problems, drugs, antisocial behaviour, murder, knife crime, and create a new place that would bring the community back onto the streets to make them feel safe. And I think if we were to flip to the next slide, the location of this particular site at the end of Walthamstow High Street, which is Europe's longest market high street. So it's got that claim to fame. And this public-private sector partnership was challenging. They all are, obviously, in different ways. But this was an example of a public body working closely with the private sector business to deliver a scheme. And it was actually slightly shorter, but it was effectively a 2-year from meeting to delivery. And Crate St James Street in Walthamstow has been open a year now. It had its first birthday yesterday. And the outcomes from that particular intervention, which is a meanwhile scheme, it's a 5-year use. There's a disused car park outside of an overground station. The outcomes really come from the tight curation of the scheme, which I think is the 3rd slide. By curation, we mean and it's all about the slide. Is entrepreneurs in beverage.
I think we are having an issue with Adam's audio.
Yeah, maybe Adam can call back in again. Is it a signal issue?
Adam, are you here? I think his screen's frozen again.
Oh.
again. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
He's back.
Are you back?
Sorry. I just closing slide.
Keep going.
Overrun.
Here we go.
Closing slide. So this was a a disused sect.
Oh,
Spaces in the end. So
okay. I think his voice is completely breaking.
Yeah.
Should we, Adam, do you want to log back in? Because we can't hear you at all. Your voice is breaking a ton. Maybe you should try your cell phone and try to log in through that. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask Rohit to state your 3-point manifesto when we reimagine streets as places of culture and commerce. Rohit?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first point in my manifesto would be to recognize that cities are a place of exchange, and currently the land use based urbanism or urban planning that we are subscribing to actually doesn't recognize many kinds of exchanges that are legitimate. In a city like Mumbai, these exchanges represent 68% of livelihoods. And it is really the deep grassroots economy that keeps the city and even the country going. And I think supporting that economy is our best bet to address urban poverty. There is a lot done to address the organized economy, which we know and which is required. I'm not saying that that needs to be ignored, but at the same time, equal attention, if not more attention, due to the sheer scale, has to be awarded to the grassroots economy that really is concerning the majority of our people. And as things, I mean, the other positives is that it's an economy which is extremely local. It's in the direction of the low carbon economy that the entire globe is trying to move towards. So even more reasons to kind of support that. That will be the first point. The second point would be actually more to the kind of architectural typologies that are emerging now. I mean, we see across the world buildings being developed on top of parking podiums, large gated communities. So basically, the kind of living edge that the buildings and used to offer to the city earlier is now becoming inert. Parking lots and utilities and compound walls. So what used to be very vibrant neighborhoods, vibrant communities is becoming just blank walls. I mean, sometimes those walls are kind of medium to do some fantastic formal work for architects, but I don't think that's enough to kind of to really liven up the streetscapes and the city life. So I think we have to be careful about the kind of architectural typologies that seem convenient, but which are, I think, killing the lives of our streets. And my last point would be.
Oh yes, right.
My last point would be that I think design and planning have a role to play in managing the urban space a little differently. There are various claims on that public space. People need to drive their cars, public transport needs to run, emergency services need to run, but there is also a whole lot of other things that are happening in those streets and for which these streets are probably not designed for. So what I'm showing you right now is a range of street furniture that we had proposed for the city of Mumbai, which was basically a modular system which could kind of adapt and evolve to serve various purposes, from simple crowd management to benches to advertising supports to little cupboards in which hawkers and street vendors could do their business, and it kind of kept their presence on the streets, organized it in a way that they could continue working without reducing their impact on the general flow of traffic and pedestrian movements. So the idea was to use design to drive that kind of a consensus between the various users of public space.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Shall we try going back to Adam? Adam, how are you doing?
I'm here.
Yeah, I think we got how many? Yeah, we got 2/3 through the way or halfway through. Have another bash at it.
Yeah. So we get to the curation piece, which was the tenant mix, which is slide 3, I think. So public-private sector partnerships. So we've got curation mix. So really important piece of the story, the physical intervention of the people, the businesses, the entrepreneurs that the early adopters in these meanwhile schemes. And this meanwhile scheme was about so much more than just building a structure on a car park to activate or reactivate a high street. This was about creating community focus. This was about litmus testing workspace for the future developments that are coming along. So this is very much just strategic intervention from the local authorities' perspective as well, from an economic development perspective. But very quickly, a heavily curated environment, so cross-sector, cross-life stage, a mix of retail services, wellbeing businesses, and some food and beverage for the nighttime economy. And 600 businesses inquired for 34 spaces on this particular project. So it really proved that the micro enterprise, the MSMEs, are in the suburbs, in the suburban capitals of London, are desperate for decent space, and there is a real lack of provision in the suburbs.
That's really insightful. Thanks, Adam. I mean, I met you when you were working on that project with the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and I met a few of the early adopters who were involved in the Crate project, and over a drink and chat with you and them. You obviously you were trying from the very beginning to reinvent the retail rule book, as you always favoured doing. What kind of insights do you gain from the early adopters, all told? You know, and what about the feedback that they gave you makes you feel that you would do something similar again in the future, or adapt your strategy? What kind of feedback did you get from the local authority about what you've achieved, and what kind of input did they make to help you?
Sure. Well, I think you know, critically, whether it's the tenants in the business or the local community, all the stakeholders, it started out with engagement, consultant, public consultation, and then blood, sweat, and tears to deliver it. The interesting feedback from the MSME perspective, and this goes sort of across the board, across other Crate sites as well, is that it's the platform, it's the soft approach to supporting the businesses. So it's facilitating the business along there. It's not getting in their businesses. It's very much nudging the SMEs, the entrepreneurs along. The local authority, London Borough of Waltham Forest, who were incredibly supportive of the delivery of this scheme, and I do a lot of talks with the guys at London Borough of Waltham Forest, which were Borough of Culture last year, London Mayor Borough of Culture. Those guys, the outcomes for the local authority and the community, of course, were focused initially around improving. Can you hear me? Keep going in and out. Improving and adding confidence back into that high street, which was referred to as the bottom of Walthamstow Market. And I've tried desperately hard to shake that bottom of the market to the start of the market. And I think that the real outcome from its first year has been a success in the businesses that have been there, and the adoption and the commitment from the local community, who have been massively supportive of the scheme, who use the scheme, whether it's to have dresses altered, whether it's to have a website built. They're coming in for a beer and a pizza. It's become a real community asset. 12 months.
I just quickly wanted to perhaps point out to audience members who are not going to be aware of that, Adam, of course, which was the larger picture, which is there's new housing just literally round the corner from that, back off the high street. And I think when I spoke to you, you were saying that it was what you were creating was a real asset for those housing developers who would otherwise then have to go ahead and create something like that from scratch, wouldn't they? And so by you applying this bespoke approach is much more effective.
Absolutely, it's the activator.
The activator, that's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah. 3,000 units, resi units being built within a very close proximity of St James Quarter, St James Street, Black Horse Road, this end of E17 over the next few years. And the activator on the car park at St James Street was this is very much a strategic play. It's a narrative play, but it's amenity. And when you're building that much resi, amenity must come with. And it's great to see amenity going in early rather than after the fact. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about strategy of adaptability, but strategy and what comes first. Like, you need to have transport infrastructure if you're going to have a hope of doing a good new mixed-use neighborhood. So we turn to Rohit. Rohit, you created this really interesting, very, very well-written hawkers policy for street trading in Mumbai 6 years ago, and in response to the national legislation in India for the right to livelihood. All Indian cities had to make provision for, recognizing the social economic importance of street trading. In it, you have a lot of really, really fine planning and design propositions. And the point you were making about architecture being as important for the whole business of managing and planning space, the art of organization, is really, really important. So I'm interested to know how many of your propositions in the policy have actually been implemented, or do you feel have influenced people across India?
I mean, actual implementation is. We did this for the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, so we were hoping that they would implement it in some places. We still hope they would, but I think the implementation is a very complex situation, because not that the designs or the proposals were not appreciated, but it kind of questions a whole lot of things within the way the municipal authorities and local urban governments work. I mean, to kind of illustrate very clearly, the department within the Mumbai municipality that deals with the hawking licenses and the department that actually manages the public space, the pavements, the roads, the urban furniture, etc., are completely different. They don't speak to each other. So for a proposal like this to be implemented, it would be first required that the way in which these departments work, they understand that their work is actually interrelated, that they cannot keep working in silos, saying that we take care of the licensing the hawkers and somebody else takes care of managing the public domain. So I think so the implementation is a little bit of a very slow process. But I'm still happy that we got an opportunity to do this, because I think through the interaction we have had with the city authorities, I think there's at least a change in the way they have themselves started looking at the public domain and at street vending. Because I think one of the biggest problem is the problem of perspective. I mean, we have always looked at street vending as some kind of a malign growth happening within the city, and I think it's important to completely change that perspective. Really look at it as a boon. I mean, as something that is providing decent livelihood, honest livelihood to a lot of people who otherwise will be unemployed and probably rioting. So I think we have to recognize the social and the economic value of the service they are providing. And they also exist because they offer some kind of convenience and some kind of value to a lot of citizens of the city as well. So they are not existing in isolation. They are definitely not a burden or something that we need to wish away. I think that change in perspective is important, and I think our work has contributed a little bit towards that. I mean, we have since then been called by the city authorities to do some other public space projects, and we do have this in the back of our minds. We every time able to table this, we always try and do that so that it's not forgotten.
Yeah, I hear you very well. I think that this is fundamentally about, in essence, about destigmatizing the street traders' role within society, and if that can be, the empowerment of the street trader, if that can be done through various means, then that's at the heart of it. And it leads very nicely on to Prathima's question about inclusive economic growth.
Yeah, I think on that note, we all will agree that inclusive economic growth is one of the most crucial agendas for the future. I think we've seen how this pandemic has ripped through and amplified how unequal our world is, whether you're in emerging world economy like us here in India, or if you're in New York or London, all of us are seeing the fractures in our society that this pandemic in a way has highlighted the inequities in our society. And I think all of us will agree that the road to recovery should be based on inclusion, and that's crucial for a healthier, happier society. And the work that you both do is crucial to that road to recovery. The idea of inclusive development is about empowering local businesses and micro entrepreneurs like the street vendors, the SMEs, and the micro entrepreneurs, or the artisans that that become the community and ecosystem of your physical infrastructure. And we are now in a way in the era of deglobalization. The world seems to be moving towards localization, and both your work empower that idea of local entrepreneurship, authentic local cultures and businesses. Adam, your work has in a way, focused on entrepreneurial activities and enabling startups and micro businesses, and creating work-lived neighborhoods, which are crucial for economic growth. How do you view inclusive growth, and how do you, in a way, enable this through your work and projects? Adam?
Yep. Well, I think it's a great question. I think it couldn't be more relevant. I think the interesting thing about any design pre-pandemic of a structure, of a platform, clearly has to be looked at, whether it's retail, whether it's workspace, flex space, whatever it might be, residential. I think there's a really, really interesting time in our lives now for change, and there's a great opportunity to hit the circuit breaker, so to speak. With regards inclusivity, and I think that's at the centre of everything that I've ever done, from a design perspective and from a curation perspective, because I've always believed in the sites to be inclusive, not exclusive, to be outwardly facing, so that the businesses don't feel as if they're in the cheap seats. And it's really, really important from a micro SME, from any background, from an entrepreneur from any background, to feel part of something bigger in a scenario where nobody wins unless everybody wins. And that's something that I've always done with Crate and before Crate, and we'll do post Crate as well. But essentially, I think it's never been so apparent. And I think this time in our lives that we have now to do something about it, we've got to grab it and we've got to run with it, and we've got to ensure that economic development teams in local authorities globally are in tune and are relevant.
No, that's such a great point to make. Nobody wins unless everybody wins. And I think, like you said, that message has never been more important as we see this pandemic ripping through our societies and economies. Rohit, in India, a large part of our workforce, almost 82% of our workforce is in the informal sector. And as we reopen our economies, one of the crucial agendas for the COVID recovery plan is this whole new mantra that our Prime Minister seems to have about a vocal for local program with a focus on self-sufficiency, especially of the bottom of the pyramid. Now, these are all very shiny, words for PR campaigns. But what, do you think, obviously, this idea of empowering grassroots economy is the best bet for tackling poverty? And how do you move from the mantra to action? From the dictum of political campaigns to real work on ground. What are the things we need to do to enable inclusive economic growth to play out? And how do you see that in the work that you do, which is enabling the informal, communities in our city, the food entrepreneurs, the artisans?
Yeah.
What kind of things should we be doing to unleash this energy?
Yeah. So one is what I already said. One is looking at that entire grassroots economy in a positive way. The second is to change our systems so that we are more receptive and more attentive to how they function. I mean, I always remember this really remarkable quote by Muhammad Yunus, who, the Nobel laureate in economics a few years ago, and he was the inventor of what they call microcredit now. And he had said that it's not the people who need to be credit worthy, it's the banks who need to be people worthy. So I think right now our entire institutional setup, I mean, whether it's private sector, whether it's government, this entire sea of people in street vendors, rack pickers, so many other participants in the informal economy are completely in a blind spot. So I think the way forward would be to actually see how institutions could shift and kind of try and meet this whole range of people and activities and see how they can be supported. I think this is really an opportunity. This post-COVID situation is an opportunity, because what this sector needs is not a huge amount of investment in infrastructure, etc., which the formal economy might need. They basically just need legislative changes. They need more rights. They need more protection. and these things don't cost a whole lot of money. So if you could actually kind of kickstart a local economy, I think that would be the area to start with, because they don't want investments from IMF or from Japanese Development Bank or from anywhere. They just want local regulations and local administration to shift and be a little bit more empathetic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really the opportunity to make use of, you know, and they could actually be the torch bearers of our economic revival and recovery. Because by
agree. I think
nature, they are far more resilient. They are far more resilient than the formal structures. I mean, because they are
and
less
we need to
dependent on. Yeah. Tell
Yeah,
me.
we need to start thinking about building incubators for for the entrepreneurs, the micro entrepreneurs at the bottom of the pyramid, and that's really the road to sustainable and inclusive growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the problems right now is that they are running reasonably successful businesses. They are just a large part of their profits are actually going away because the businesses are not entirely legitimate. They are harassed. So there is a kind of precarity with the whole precariousness in the whole situation in which they are in. And so if those conditions could change, they would be even more profitable. They would actually probably enrich themselves and move on to set up even better businesses. So there is there's a lot to kind of there's a good case for people to just accept those businesses and serve them, and they will really flourish. I mean, right now, they are surviving, not flourishing.
Yes.
Yep.
I think so. Thank you, Rohit, for that. Let's now turn to this mega question of the actual cultural identity and role of public streets. Now, the cultural sector has been put greatly in peril by the pandemic and is in a very vulnerable state in many, many places. But pop culture is another formidable force. And it begs the question of, how can culture and cultural programs, cultural strategies help to revive failing high streets and down at heel town centres in ways that avoid the kind of all too common cookie cutter uniformity perpetuating monocultures? I mean, India particularly has such a strong cultural heritage of streets, richly activity-based, with festivals, celebrations, other expressions of community identity. Here in the UK, I think we've become a little bit too clever at packaging and more artificial notions of street culture. I think brand culture is responsible for, let's say, dominating some of that language a bit too much. But Mumbai has a wonderful indigenous culture. It's the biggest producer of handmade items and so on. So how can we make sure that this kind of interdependency in a fruitful way is nurtured between retail and culture? And they're not completely separate anyway. A lot of artists are very naturally have to be entrepreneurial, and retail is using cultural languages in very, very fertile ways in any case. So Adam, you have you've had a wonderful program of cultural events at Crate over the time.
Yeah, we're lucky with the Walthamstow site, the Waltham Forest site, where it opened during Borough of Culture, London Borough of Culture, as I mentioned earlier, which is the Mayor's initiative. A fantastic year of cultural events right way through London Borough of Waltham Forest, and we hosted a number of events throughout the year, whether it was art nights where we had 5,000 people come through on a Saturday, Pride. There was an incredible series of events that ran through the site. I think it comes back to, again, from a physical perspective, so from a designer's perspective, it's about creating the right environments, and those environments don't look like big shiny towers. They look like inclusive, open environments where anyone can walk in, feel welcome, do business, buy, sell, whatever it is. And I think that, you know, from a physical perspective, I think we mustn't give up on bricks and mortar. You know, I think it is about looking forward, and I think that it's time for institutional landlords, traditional investors to look at, well, they have to look at their assets, they have to look at the city centres that they own and control, and take note of change and build less ivory towers, build more inclusive environments for the early adopters, the entrepreneurs, the micro SMEs, the creatives, because that seeds culture, that seeds nightlife, that brings authenticity back into cities. It creates vibrancy, it adds value, it makes places safe, and it brings confidence back into town centres, whether it's urban environments or town centres. And you can't buy that, and you can't curate that. You know, there's a lot of organic curation goes into stuff like that, and it's very important that developers and institutions and local authorities nurture it and facilitate it, but don't perhaps try and overly control it. So culture events and cultural series of cultural curated events are hugely important to the success of any scheme from an operator's perspective. From a local community's perspective, it's imperative because it's their opportunity to come in and get involved, whatever it might be, whether it's Chinese New Year, various different events that I can think that we've ran in the last 12 months on that particular site have been massively inclusive and aimed at getting the local community into these environments, mixing with entrepreneurs, mixing with small businesses, whether they're street food traders or whether they're dressmakers.
Yeah, brilliant. Rohit, what are your thoughts on the interdependency in a healthy way between culture and commerce?
I think both are definitely essential for cities to be successful. I think the problem we have been having is that unfortunately there is this understanding that we need to start fabricate culture. I mean, there are branding agencies that are trying to package cities and sell cities. So I think the key issue here is contextuality, being aware of each city, its history, its geography, where it has come from, and there is a certain uniqueness. I think what we have suffered, the whole globally, we have suffered from it has the globalization of capital has happened before the globalization of anything else. So people have created urban projects to attract global capital rather than respond to a contextual demand. And I think we are kind of seeing the flip side of all that, because the demand remains, and if you don't cater to that demand, I mean, you can package products, you can brand product, but they will not sell because they do not cater to the demand. And so I think the contextuality is essential even for good commerce. Unless your products, whether they are real estate products or your urban policies, are responding to a local demand, and by that responding to the local culture as well, they will work. Otherwise, they may seem to work for some, but it won't be a sustainable situation. And I'm happy, that I'm in a city which does not need to create a shopping festival or something like that. I mean, I have enough festivals. There is enough average streets of Mumbai, and we do not need a branding agency to try and sell Mumbai to as whatever. I mean, there is enough happening here to if you don't notice it, then the problem is not with the city.
Yeah.
So I think yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I visited Mumbai once, and it's always the maximum city. It's a fantastic place.
Yes.
It does not deserve to
It's
be
a great place. Yes.
super branded. Of course, that is going to be a tendency everywhere, isn't it? Really, wherever such branding.
But I think it's also a little bit of there is what I would call a global citizenry that expects the same things everywhere. They want the same references. They want the same kind of milestones. And I think that's a pity. I mean, that's a real pity. I mean, if I hope the new, the post-COVID world would be global in terms of exchange of ideas, but not necessarily in exchange of anything else.
Yeah, right. Thanks for that.
You're right, Rohit. I think the era that we've previously seen has focused a ton on capital and globalization of products. But the things that won even during that era has been authentic local culture. Even if whichever city you would visit as a global citizen, you were looking for the flavor of that place. You were looking for the authentic brands, ideas of that place. So I think we'll hopefully see that coming back, the post-COVID era in a bigger way, because that's needed not just for sustainability, but also for a healthier economic future. My next point is that, Rohit, in his report, proposes to extend the role of the street vendor to become a community worker with eyes on the streets, and in a way combining employment and community service and changing the vendor's status within our communities. While Adam, as an entrepreneur of Community Retail Future, aims to shape the development journey and the commercial journey together by ensuring that he brings in well-aligned network of retailers while creating a vibrant, authentic neighborhood that we've just discussed. Rohit, how do you enable informal workers in our cities as a community to become more collaborative and to play that community role within our cities? And how do we enable this new generation of street leadership and ecosystem? What are the approaches we can take to, make that vision come alive?
No, I think in many ways they are already playing that role. I mean, they have not been recognized about playing that role. They have not been given due credit, but they are already playing that role. I mean, the Mumbai police will tell you that a lot of informers are actually street vendors. So there, and also in terms of safety. I mean, I remember when my son was much younger, he was unwell and he didn't go to school. And down asked me, I didn't see your son for the last 2 days. Is he not well? So that is the kind of presence and kind of social network they are part of. And, I think it is not a big shift for them to become community workers. I think they already are. I think it's the other way around. I think the communities have to recognize that role and give them that due space and respect for that. It's a long process. I don't think it will happen immediately because these are changes of mindsets and if there is one thing I've learned during my interaction with the city authorities, that one has to be extremely patient. I mean, even this National Act for Street Vending, it became a national act it was drafted in 2009 and it was accepted in the parliament in 2013. And the whole process started with one vendor taking the Delhi municipal authorities to court because he was evicted from his street vending business in 1989. So it took almost 25 years for one court case to really become a national law. So, if there's one thing I have learned is that one has to be extremely patient. Whatever changes, I think we are moving in the right direction, but maybe not fast enough. But still, we're moving in that direction. The kind of changes this demands is quite complex. The changes in administrative structures, changes in political organization, changes even in the way there are street unions. I mean, there are unions of street vendors, etc., etc. But even in the way they are organized, they are probably not ready for change. They are just looking at survival rather than actually going ahead and becoming more significant in the whole economic and fabric of the city.
Adam, what about you? How do you go about creating this ecosystem of diverse and creative community of entrepreneurs or retailers, and also ensure that they become stewards of that place?
Well, I think it's interesting in a meanwhile scheme where you've got early adopters, as we call them, the worker ants that are going very early, often into quite difficult landscapes, sensitive landscapes where there's disenfranchisement in the local community for whatever reason. And I think that actually, it's a very, very interesting point that that these micro SMEs, these entrepreneurs, they almost immediately stitch into the local community, both physically and digitally, and it's very prevalent. You've got a site that's open to the public, open to the local community, so much so that anyone from any background can come into any of our sites, and if they can't, I want to know why. And I think that comes down to the people in the sites. Place making is a interesting word. People make places. Buildings facilitate, the physical piece facilitates the people, but the people create the place. And I think now more than ever, the physical interaction between human beings, and with the rise of digital and the ability to utilize that digital power to stitch even further into local communities, so both physically and digitally, small businesses, entrepreneurs, street traders, whatever you want to call them, they are massively important when it comes to creating community and reuniting and regenerating community as well.
Adam, you're right. I think as we're all locked up within our homes and living in this digital public square, we are, we are really craving our local communities, and I think we're going to support them a lot more, post-COVID era. And at this moment, I want to say hello to the Digital Public Square and the community that is joining us on various platforms and Facebook pages. Hello, everyone. Please feel free to ask us questions in the video box below or leave your comments as well. Lucy?
Okay, well, while we're waiting for the rustling up the questions, I've got a quick one as a final one from me and Prathima. So this whole adaptation that that many streets in cities across the world have made, or let's say the local municipalities have made very, very deftly, adapting streets to make them more walkable and more cyclable in many places. It begs the question of the argument for creating more adaptable infrastructures to support retail as we come out of this. Like new covered market structures together with soft programming activities like cooking schools. What kind of specific proposition would you make to, let's say, your local mayor, your local municipal leader right now for making it easier for policy to bring on board quickly new infrastructures? Because there are limitations and there are restrictions to planning at the moment that perhaps, in the next couple of years, we're going to need different tactics to deal with this. Tactical urbanism is now much more important than ever before. So maybe Adam first.
Brilliant. Well, I think from my perspective, really quickly, it's conception of idea, bring everyone together in a room, stakeholders, community, to shape the vision. And for me, that's elemental. If the stakeholders don't feel engaged, if you can engage everyone from the beginning and they really buy into the idea and they have a sense of ownership, I think that's really important. And to get the job done, I think everyone needs to have an "I did that" attitude. Whether it's the overworked planning teams, I can talk about planning teams in the UK. They're massively overstretched in all the local authorities I talk to. They work very hard. They work very hard to adapt to these challenging times. It's about sense of ownership. It's about being transparent, and it's about everyone buying into the vision and shaping the vision from the off. If you go in and you tell someone what you're going to do, I wouldn't blame them if they push back. So I've always believed in that, and I think more now than ever there needs to be this collaboration piece that is everyone buys in.
Fantastic. And Rohit, on the tactical urbanism, maybe some influence that you can place on local municipal leaders to accommodate things.
Actually,
fast.
Here we are in a phase where there's a lot of heavy infrastructure being built in our cities. I mean, our cities are building metro lines, they're building expressways, etc., etc., etc. And big, large transit hubs are going to be transformed in the next half a decade or a decade. What I would want to tell our administration is that to be aware of the local context. Don't just go by some standard typologies of say transit hubs, which may work elsewhere in the world. Be aware of the local economy. Be aware of the local demographics. How our markets work. Markets in all sense of the word, and try and make sure that we don't kind of create projects that do not fit in, because unlike maybe the developed economies, our cities are actually building their basic infrastructure right now. The Mumbai metro lines are being constructed right now. So I think it would be very useful if people do integrate micro entrepreneurs, street vendors, all kinds of other activities. I mean, I remember as a kid, I have seen even acrobats on the streets of Mumbai. I mean, I don't see them anymore because the streets are not friendly anymore for that. So it's a loss. I mean, it's a huge cultural loss, and hopefully we will stop these kind of losses, and hopefully we'll be able to not just protect them, but also make them our mascots. I mean, this is what Mumbai is.
Yeah. Endlessly creative. Definitely. Thank you.
As we come close to wrapping up the session, I want to ask both of you for a quick advice to all the entrepreneurs, architects, and urbanists who are joining us. If you had one piece of advice to advance and enable this field further, what would it be? Adam?
Don't give up on bricks and mortar. That's the word I would say.
Yeah.
Don't give up on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's inevitable that there's going to be less physical. It's inevitable there's going to be more digital. I'm reading an interesting book, actually. Bit of shout out. It's Reimagining Retail, if you're allowed to plug books, by Doug Stevens. Re-engineering retail, even. And imagining on the brain. And it's a really good book. It's really made me think differently about things. And there's a line in there, and he calls it digital. It's blending physical and digital. So in my world of retail, mixed use, I think it would be great to see more integration of digital. And read that book. It's brilliant.
Rohit?
I would say be extremely patient. Don't have too many too assurance. Be resilient. Be open to ideas. And patience. I mean, especially in the Indian context. I mean, things do work, but they work slowly, and it's not such a bad thing that things work slowly, because generally things that work fast need not necessarily be the right ones. So I think I would agree with Adam in a sense. There is still a lot to be achieved in the brick and mortar. It's not that we have got it all right. The digital is going to add new dimensions. I also feel after the whole experience of the past few months, people would actually crave for what the digital cannot offer. They would probably start valuing the non-digital things and the kind of uncertainties and surprises that are there in the physical world, which are probably not. I mean, the digital world, for all whatever you say, is still extremely curated. It's somebody else's vision that you are experiencing, and I hope that people do realize that. I mean, I already see a difference because I'm also teaching. I already see a difference between the students I had, say, 15, 20 years ago and the students I have now. There is a certain poverty of experience, of personal experience. And I think the digital exposure is partly responsible for that. There is a kind of uniformity of experience amongst the students. And I hope that people realize the value of the non-digital. And the cities are the best expression of that value.
Definitely.
This was such an amazing and rich conversation. I want to thank both of you for joining us today on this important agenda that really has to be the foundation for the road to recovery. And I will invite all of you to continue to join our Urban Manifesto series every Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. London time, 9 p.m. India time, and 11:30 a.m. New York time, right? So we'd love to have all of your thoughts also on, the major agendas we should have for our urban futures. Do join us next week as we debate one of the most contested ideas of urbanism, which is about the future of density. And we are thrilled to have icon of livable urban density, the director of planning, former director of planning at Vancouver, Larry Beasley, who's known for this whole phenomena called Vancouverism, which combines livability with high density. And we also have best-selling author Anna Menton, who wrote one of those iconic books on big capital, who is London for? So it promises to be a very vibrant discussion. So please do continue to join us, and do share your agenda for what our urban manifesto should be as we think about moving ahead into the new era post-COVID. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Adam and Rohit,
Thank you.
for this very important conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.